Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. You're listening to the What's Happening Muslim show brought to you by the Islamic Vibes podcast. I'm your host Majid, and today I'm joined by my co-hosts Rash and JK. Assalamu alaikum, brothers. How's it going?
Wa alaikum salam.
Wa alaikum salam. All good.
Bro, Rash, how you coping from the after effects?
Yeah, I got hit reasonably badly. I was in bed for a couple of days, but alhamdulillah, not too bad. Yeah, it's been chasing the family. Everybody else in the family's had it, and I was the only one who hadn't. So yeah, got through it. Okay, alhamdulillah. Yeah, no complaints.
No, good man. Good man. Allah give you great new shifa and give you health and wealth.
Ameen.
Yeah. JK, all good with you, bro?
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Yeah, good. I obviously haven't been on in a while. Came back from Bangladesh a few weeks ago. I also got COVID as well, which isn't great. But I think, to be fair, I don't want to get on into the discussion, but I think the vaccines, I don't know, I feel like they've helped. Like I've had the 2 vaccines, and I've heard other people that didn't have it had it far worse. Whereas for me, two kind of severe days, and other than that, it's been all right. A bit of a lingering cough, and that's pretty much it. So I'm not sure. I'm not here advocating the vaccines, but it feels like it had some impact, positive impact.
Alhamdulillah. No, alhamdulillah is good, man. Young guys, you can fight off this virus. It's mainly affects the elders quite a bit.
True.
But yeah, today's podcast, guys, it should be an interesting one. Got a few things I want to talk about. But before going into the sort of main segment of the podcast, I just want to bring up the issue of what's kicking off in Sweden. Because I thought, you know what, we're doing a podcast. It's something that has gone viral on Twitter. A lot of Muslims are speaking about it, and and being a father as well, it's just one of those things I thought, you know what, it'd be worth speaking about it. And for those who probably don't know what's going on in Sweden at the moment, there's a lot of attention being brought to the activities of the social services in Sweden, where actually for quite a few years now, what they've been doing is they've been, kidnapping is a strong word, but they've been removing children from their parents. And one statistic which I came across was that since 2014, 32,000 children have been, sort of taken away from their families. And I've seen, and I'm sure you guys have as well, seen the disturbing footage, of mothers being grabbed and pushed to the ground whilst their children are being taken away. And, it's kind of heartbreaking. And it is something which a lot of Muslims are speaking about. And as a parent, it's something which hits you hard. So I thought it'd be worth just bringing it up and getting your thoughts on it, really, if, what you think about what's going on.
Yeah, it is heartbreaking for 2 reasons, not just obviously, that's the worst nightmare of any parent, isn't it? For your children to be taken away from you like that. It's just, even just seeing the video images and stuff. But for the brothers and sisters who are suffering it, it's worse because a lot of them are they've just come from war-torn places like Syria. So they're immigrants in the first place, finally get away from, all the bombs dropping down on them and all the conflict that they come from. Think they, finally found some tranquility and, living somewhere without war. And next thing your children get taken away from you. So, yeah, that's what really hit home. And I think a lot of people feel the same. I think maybe the background to it sounds like, again, if the Swedish government have now come out and kind of tried to debunk all of it or discredit the allegations and stuff. And a lot of the media is trying to cover it from that point of view. But that doesn't take away from the stats that you've already highlighted that are correct. What they're trying to say is a lot of these people who we've taken children away from are people who, harmed their children or psychological abuse or physical abuse to their children. But what they are not taking into account is Sweden being this very liberal, very high on kind of children's rights as well as people's rights. Their culture is very, very different. In our culture, we know that if your kid steps out of line a little bit, giving them a little slap or giving them a few harsh words is part of the way we bring them up. That's our culture. That's even from an Islamic point of view, we treat children not as children from the age of, 8, 9, 10, 11. We start to treat them more like adults. We expect more from them. And their way of life is different, and they're taking advantage of that. And therefore, we've seen these horrific videos of children being taken away from their parents. So I think it does need highlighting, and maybe, I don't know if you want to maybe dig a little bit deeper, because I think there's the liberal element to it, and I think there's an anti-Islamic ideological part to it as well. But maybe for another day, perhaps. But there are more undertones to it than just, the social services are doing or making mistakes.
Yeah, from what I know, it's broader. Yeah, like you said, it's if they view certain things that they're teaching the children, or the child has said something in school that they don't agree with, or it clashes with their ideology of liberalism and secularism, that is a trigger for, this child's been radicalized or whatever it may be, and that is given as a reason to take them away from their parents. It's heartbreaking to watch, really. Some of the videos, some of the messages from the brothers and sisters who are suffering this as well. It's really, really sad. They probably thought, like I said, they're coming from a war-torn country to a better place, but they probably prefer to be back where they came from, really. At least they're with their children and family, even though, there's a risk of being killed from bombing and stuff like that. The other thing it really highlights is the, Scandinavian countries like Sweden, Norway, these countries are often given as examples as being like the top, liberal nation, and the equity that they have for people, and they're used as examples of liberalism, really, and the fact that the population is happy and kind of in a good place. But this really shows that there's this very aggressive form of liberalism, which if you don't follow their way, they will take action against you. And obviously Islam is one deen, ideology, you can say, that clash with liberalism. So no wonder they're targeting Muslims, because Muslims won't just succumb to these liberal values and ideas.
Yeah, no, definitely, bro. And the thing is from what there are some reports that are coming out, which is sort of like indicating from what Rashan you are saying is not just about abuse, or it's not just about children not having food. It's more to do with the fact that, the children are behaving in an Islamic way, or the parents are behaving in an Islamic way. So they're trying to safeguard their children. But some of the reports you hear is, I've listened to sort of like accounts where parents are saying that their daughters were taken away and given to drunk people. Okay, a family, they obviously drink and stuff, and they were raped. And they even took them to court, and the person was sort of let off. And this is what you got to understand is this has been happening for a while. But JK, what this reminds me of, similar to, we did a podcast a while back about what happened in Canada.
Oh yeah.
With those schools for the indigenous children.
Yeah.
And you know what? There is similarities, because what they're trying to say here is that if you want to live, in Sweden, then we need to basically change you and mold you to be part of this society in accordance with liberalism, democracy, freedoms, and so on.
Yeah.
So these children are being taken away, and the excuses that are being given are bogus, because on one account there was this woman who was saying that they took her child away because she had no food. Okay, and I remember posting this on TikTok, for example, and somebody said, well, look, they didn't have enough food. So my response was, look, either you're not a parent, right, or you don't get it, because if they don't have any food, then give them food. But taking the child away from the mother, this is like, it's just, how does that even make sense, right? So, it is a sad situation. And I think what Rash said, it is important that we need to generate some awareness in regards to this, but there is definitely some underlying issues here on an ideological level. This isn't just purely abuse. This isn't just purely, people are hungry. This is basically a way of trying to neutralize the Muslims in that country by, getting them to adopt their way of life forcibly, right? Thinking that if you get 3-4-year-old children and they'll grow up in a secular family.
It's all to do with assimilation. It's all to do with trying to get the Muslims to integrate more. The way to look at it is, say for instance, no one's saying that the children shouldn't be protected. If there are some abusive parents, be they Muslim or otherwise, children need to be protected. But it's the hypocrisy is that it's these Western nations that are going in, bombing our lands, causing conflict in our lands, instigating war, using their weapons that they're making money out of the weapons that they use in our lands, create all of the psychological abuse of the people there in the first place. Those people leave war-torn places and then come to the Western lands. They're going to be psychologically scarred. There's one case that I read was, yes, the father was abusive to the children, verbally, but he was mentally scarred from his whole family being killed in Syria. So you can appreciate that someone whose family is destroyed in Syria, okay, I'm not saying that's an excuse to abuse your children, but you guys caused these problems, and now you're trying to show Muslims in a negative light by saying, look, these Muslims are treating their children badly. And then that fear that they then instill in the community, that's fear pushing Muslims to integrate more. And, there's fear for Muslims in Sweden and these nations anyway. The right wing, the populism, those kind of things are growing in these countries. There's a very much an anti-Islam narrative in Sweden, again, on the basis of people don't like the fact that there's immigration, obviously mass immigration, because Sweden's known as a country that's taken in a lot of immigrants. But then Sweden's also known as one of the highest tax-paying countries as well. So people aren't happy that they're paying like 40-50% tax, and then their services are being reduced because Muslims are coming into their country and having to share that wealth with them. So there's all these undertones, and as part of that, it's easy to try and either castigate the Muslims or at the same time try to integrate them in such a way that they leave their Islam. So it's like a double-edged sword from an Islamic point of view.
Yeah, no, exactly, bro, exactly. And in regards to Sweden, as people, when they think of Sweden, I think they'll think of like IKEA and stuff like that, and these happy, hippie type of people. But don't be fooled, because the reality is that it was the Swedish government which wanted to market its weapons by showcasing them in Afghanistan not too long ago.
Yeah.
So, what we need to do is we need to look at this situation. Obviously, we need to make dua for the Muslims that are going through this, and, pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reunites the parents with their children. And as JK said, if you ask the people, they would probably say, you know what, if I was killed with my family in Syria or wherever, this would have been better than coming here and being separated by, our children, knowing that the children are then going to be given to families who are not going to be Muslim, who are going to be pushing their kufr, because that's just their way of life. And, the reality is that maybe their children and their generations moving forward won't even have Iman,
Exactly.
That to being killed, it's a difficult situation, man. But yeah, what I would say is for the listeners, certainly, is look into this. And it is important that we generate awareness about what is happening, and speaking to Muslims, because you know what, it might seem far-fetched, but Sweden is in Europe, and we live in a country which shares the same way of life, same ideology. And the reality is that countries deal with their citizens in different ways, but things will change, and we just need to be ready for that change. So inshallah, on that note, guys, let's kick into the main main topic of discussion today, inshallah ta'ala, which is the issue of what's happening in India, what's happening in Karnataka. We know that since January, Muslim students were basically not allowed to attend school. They weren't allowed in their classrooms. in government-run schools. We've all seen the pictures of the Muslim students sitting outside the classroom, doing, writing down and going through the education. And what was the reason? The reason was the fact that they were banning the hijab in those schools. And there's a quote I have by the Karnataka's education minister, B.C. Nagesh. And basically, he's in support of the hijab ban in educational institutions. And what he said was that government is very firm that the school is not a platform to practice dharma, i.e. dharma being religion, right? And then moving on, because of this, we saw that there were protests in many parts of India. And we also saw the video of Muskan Khan, a sister who went to college. I think it was a school college. And, all of a sudden, she's kind of like heckled and surrounded by, at least from what I read, is 100 men with saffron scarves, okay, shouting, Jai Shri Ram and all this stuff. Basically promoting the Hindutva ideology. And her response has kind of made her famous in the fact that she didn't shy away. She, in fact, fist pumped the air and said, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, which was subhanAllah, which, was refreshing to see. Yeah. Because, I'm sure those guys were a bit shocked themselves that this single woman stood up to, a group of thugs, and the score. We've seen what these guys are capable of doing, right? Now, the thing is there's a lot to speak about in regards to this, whether it's Muskan Khan's reaction, whether it's the fact that, Muslims are sort of pinning their hope on the secular nature of the Indian constitution. So first of all, Rash, just want to get your thoughts on it, really. What do you think of what's going on in India?
Well, because we've spoken about the situation in India on a number of different podcasts, I think it's an extension of that, because we can see that there's very much a rise of the far right in, BJP over there, very much an anti-Islamic movement going on. And then the hijab is the easy target, isn't it? The hijab is the women being the weaker of the sexes. It's easier to oppress the woman. The woman can, by wearing her hijab, she demonstrates her Islam outwardly, and they're using that as an opportunity, to attack Islam. That's the way I see it. The situation in particular here is that some of these schools, sisters have been wearing hijab previously and studying there. It just so happened, like you said, in this particular area, what the background to it was that I think before the exams and things like that, there was external people who wanted to make an issue out of this, on the basis that, look, uniform is equal. So why should they be allowed to wear some uniform that is different to the normal uniform? So they're kind of adding the fact that, and they're like, look, we're wearing our hijab. This is our, this is from an Islamic point of view, we need to wear it. And I think it escalated on the basis that then, like you already referenced, some of the board and stuff up that educational establishment and stuff were tried to compare it with the fact that others started wearing those saffron scarves. So then all of a sudden, the two things were made into one. Like, okay, you lot can't wear those scarves and you lot can't wear the hijab. But that's bogus, isn't it? Because, look, at the end of the day, that one is an Islamic obligation and one is something, is what they hate really, is because it comes from the point of view of they don't want people to be outwardly showing their religion, especially Muslims, because they have a hatred for Muslims. And what this whole thing has allowed to get into the mainstream is just shown their hypocrisy, because they come out saying India tried to say that they're, the one of the, democracies in the world.
Largest democracy in the world.
Largest democracies. They try to push that narrative, but then at the same time, look at how they're treating people and their own, this idea of freedom of religion. But one point I just wanted to make quickly is I've watched some of these videos, and there was another sister who was there as well, and she highlighted that, even though it's our constitutional right to be able to wear this, we're not arguing wearing our hijab for a constitutional right. We're arguing on the basis that this is mandated from Islam, and we're going to wear this because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given this is our dress and this is what we need to wear. This is our obligation. And she re-emphasized a number of times that everybody's trying, because I think people tried to steer it in the direction of, and even when America came out and put tweets out and stuff, some of their ministers and stuff about, oh, you can't suppress religious freedom. I think they tried to steer it towards, look, you need to allow religious freedom. Whereas this sister did a really good job, in my opinion, of saying, look, it's not about my freedom. Freedom isn't the criteria here. Constitutional right isn't why we're here protesting. We're protesting because we want to wear this for religious purposes. So yeah, I think it's gonna continue, and I think some of the Western countries are a little bit worried. That's why they're speaking out now. In the past, you might have argued that the likes of CNN and BBC and stuff have been quiet about these type of things in other places, but this time they have, they've put stuff into the media. Not anywhere near like what they do when they use Afghanistan as an example. They'll show they'll try and promote oppression of women over there in academic institutions, but at least this time they have tried to cover some of it on the basis that they don't want to come across as outright hypocrites. So that's a few of my thoughts, really.
Yeah. Before I come to JK, just from what some of the points that Raj said, it's really refreshing that this system made it clear. And maybe, sometimes when we see Muslim women holding up placards saying it's my right, what tends to happen is that they may be saying it's our right from an Islamic point of view, as in Allah has given me this right, this is what I need to do. However, you made a good point that this is the agenda is set for them. What they're calling for is their freedoms based on in a secular way, based on their constitutional right. There will be some people saying that.
Yeah, there will be. Yeah,
we tend to just paint everyone with that same brush. But what's actually happening is that people are taking this agenda for their own purposes and pushing with it. JK, what are you saying?
Yeah, no, I agree with what you guys have been saying, to be fair. And I think the main message for me, it really shows the strength and bravery of our sisters, especially Muskan Khan. How, in this mob, it's a mob, right? And if you go back to some of the discussions you've had previously about the ideology, the Hindutva ideology is essentially seeking for the genocide of Muslims and for that nation to be fully all Hindus, right? So if you think about that context, that these boys that are, donning the saffron scarf and shouting Jai Shri Ram, it's not just a march. They have intense hatred for Muslims and they want to kill Muslims, basically, to put it quite frankly, right? So in this context, you have Muskan Khan, it looks like she's alone from the video, walking in the middle of this mob and shouting Allahu Akbar. Like, she's not even shivering. She's no fear, pure iman, pure tawakkul in Allah. So that in itself is really refreshing to see. And, that it's something you want all Muslims to have that attitude. Many Muslims do that, but really when our sisters do it, because we men are the ones who are meant to be protecting our sisters, really, right? So when you see our sisters do it, it makes you happy, but it also shows the hypocrisy or even the cowardice, you could say, of some of the men who should be stepping up here, right? The leaders who have just been muted by what India have been doing. They haven't really spoken out. So it really shows the bravery and kind of strength of Muskan Khan in doing that. And the fact that she's shouting Allahu Akbar as well, like that in itself will cause even more of a reaction, but she doesn't care. She's just shouting Allahu Akbar, right? So no, this was really refreshing to see. But I think the message you guys brought up is quite a key one as well. I think it's important that we don't allow the Western narrative to take control of this, nor do we want feminists from amongst Muslims as well to take control of this narrative and promote the message around hijab being either a constitutional right, a human right, my choice, because this is what they want to do. And I think, to be fair, one of the reasons why the West have kind of taken this, they may have done it because there's a bit of pressure that they need to report on this quite a big story, but actually they will spin it their own way. Like I was reading an article from The Wire, and they spin this message that, you know, she stood up for Muslims, but not only Muslims, she stood up for all women, that they should have the right to wear what they want, right? But that's not our message, because, you know, the constitutional right of India and other, you know, Western countries is the same right that allows women to walk half naked. You know, we don't call for that framework. That's not our framework of change, our framework for justice. The point you made is clear, that Muskan Khan, she's just saying it's her right. Like she said, you know, this is my right. But, you know, that doesn't mean it's a human right, nor a constitutional right. It's just a right that Allah has allowed her to wear. And it's an obligation that Allah has put on the woman. And she should be able to do this, right? I think we can question the hypocrisy of freedom. We can question the hypocrisy that they allow them to do this, but they don't allow us to wear this, right? I think that's a fair angle, but we should be really careful that we don't start to call for change on this premise or on this framework. It's important that our premise for change, premise for justice, is the Quran and the Sunnah, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is really important, because otherwise what will happen is that we will call for the very thing that we're trying to fight against, right? Liberalism and the fact, and pluralism, and the fact that you can anyone can wear anything they want. We don't call for that, right? So I've always said that we should be really careful with the language that we use when it comes to change or justice, right? And just to give you another example, you know, the term right, when we say we're calling for our rights, it automatically links to the concept of human rights, the UN Charter of Human Rights, right? It links to constitutional rights, the rights that the government give you. But, you know, using the term rights, there's nothing wrong with that really, but it carries a certain connotation, a certain meaning. So we need to be careful of using that. Another example is the term democracy. Often some people, you know, we have, in many of our countries, we have dictators, right? People that just kind of force laws on people and force people to act. So often people will start calling for democracy. What they mean really is they want change to be based on the will of the people, which isn't against Islam. Islam also says that authority belongs to the people, that the people should decide, you know, who they authorize, but the sovereignty belongs to Allah. The rule belongs to Allah. We know that democracy doesn't mean, and often a more assiduous example is that people start to define democracy as being shura, consultation, which is not, right? So the point I'm trying to make here is that we need to avoid using the lexicon or the language of the colonizer. We've got our own language, our own framework, that we need to call for change and justice. And this is really promising to see what's happening in India, and the fact that it is a slap in the face of the Hindutva mobs that you see. But it comes with a bit of a risk as well, that we need to make sure that we control the narrative and make sure that our call, like the other sister spoke about, I don't know who that sister was, but she really quite clearly articulated that our reason to wear hijab is not because we have some constitutional right from the Indian's constitution. The reason we want to wear hijab is that it's an obligation from Allah, and we will wear it for that reason alone.
Yeah.
So I think that is a really important message to highlight from this case that we're seeing.
Yeah, no, exactly, bro. And it's important, like you said, to be wary of using certain language, because the thing is, when I've spoken to Muslims from India, and the situation is bad there, because it's not like they can get up and leave, because the reality is that the Muslims have been in India for over 1,000 years, right? They are part and parcel from they are from there, right? So it's not like you get up and actually Muslims ruled that land for over 1,000 years, right?
It's Muslim land.
It's Muslim land. So the thing is that here what you got to understand is, I think for Muslims now, when you're not in India and you're seeing what's happening, you can see how they want to clutch onto something. So what they clutch onto is the secular nature of the Indian constitution, because they feel what this will do, this will be a counter to the rise of Hindutva, right? But what we have to understand is that in reality, if you study the history of India, right, from the time the British went to India, right, and the British Raj happened and they took over, you saw that slowly, they already started marginalize the position of the Muslims in India, right? In 1947, the situation of what happened in India with the Muslims, against those discrimination, right? And, you know, what we have to understand is that BJP, right? Okay, Modi's been in 8-9 years. Okay, they had a spell in power before. But the reality is you look at like what happened in Babri Masjid and what's been happening since 1947. I remember speaking to a brother from India on one of the podcasts that we did for Voice of the Ummah, Talking Deen. And he said, look, what you have to understand is this isn't a BJP phenomenon as such. This has been happening. There's been an undertone of this anti-Islamic sentiment from day dot, right? From 1947. So it's just difficult on how you think that, you know, for Muslims, they have to have the zeal and the attitude of Muskan Khan, in the sense that the solution for them is Islam. That is a solution, right? However, it may seem that that's so far away, and, you know, in the immediate, whilst they're being persecuted, the rights are being taken, the Islamic rights are being taken away from these mobs and so on. They're in a situation where they think we don't know what to do. Hence why when we do see Muslims calling towards the secular nature of the Indian constitution, right? I don't believe it's because they're secular, right? No. I just think that's the only thing that they can see which can protect them from what's happening.
Yeah. They look at that as the avenue for change, because that's kind of what they know. But like I said, it's important that we ask us what's the problem, and what we're actually seeking, because that avenue of change that you're looking at in itself is the problem. And like you said, that there's always been an undertone of hatred for Muslims, but in more recent years, you've seen, there's been other things that happen in history as well, but I mean, in recent years, you've seen that there's been a bit of an acceleration from the Modi government. Like he's been there for quite a few years, but if you think about all the things that have happened in terms of, the Citizenship Amendment Act, where they try to basically, keep Muslims away from becoming citizens. NRC is very similar, where they didn't register the Muslims. You know, the fact that even in Kashmir, what's that guy, the guy who even came up with the 10 stages of genocide, or was it Stanton? I think his name is Gregory Stanton. He himself saying that the sign, and he predicted the Rwanda genocide, remember? He himself was saying that India is moving towards genocide. So yes, there has been this undertone, but it feels like it's getting to a point where they're fully accelerating and doing this. So that in this context, this is where the sisters are having to stand up for their rights. And the other message I was going to bring as well is that the hijab itself is a symbol of Islam in its comprehensive nature. What I mean by that is, they want to push this view of Islam being just about your mosque. You can practice you do your salah in your mosque, you can pray at home, you can even fast at home, and all of that very personalized, spiritual kind of ritual deen, very similar to the other religions, right? But the hijab, the thing with the hijab is that, yes, it may be an individual act, but it's an act that is witnessed in society. So people can see physically that this is someone who's a Muslim who is seeking solutions from Islam. Everyone else is becoming liberal and dressing how they want. Even in India, I went to Bangladesh, like I said, a few weeks ago, and you'd be very shocked that it's meant to be a Muslim country, but liberalism is on a high there. It's strange because we're from the heart of the West, but you see there and you think, whoa, what's happened here? So as people are moving towards Westernization and liberalism and modernism, when a sister then now comes clad and donning the Islamic dress, it sends a strong message that I am seeking solutions from my Lord, from the Quran and the Sunnah.
I'm doing this to please Allah, not
please Allah alone, not for the people. Exactly. So although it might be an individual action, it actually carries a strong message that we want Islam to be practiced in society as a whole. We want it to comprehensively practice Islam. Hence why you get this hatred towards the hijab, not only in India, even in the UK itself. Prime Minister calling, the women letterboxes and whatever. You have this hatred for hijab because it carries it's a symbolism of Islam and its comprehensiveness. I think there's a lot going on there, but this action itself really, really highlights how India has accelerated towards the Hindutva kind of outcome they're looking for, which is the genocide of Muslims.
But another thing, Rash, I want to ask you, doesn't this show hypocrisy in the sense that there's a claim mainly from the West that Islam denies education to women, girls, right? But if we look at the actual situation in this day and age now, right, it's countries like France, it's places like India, and I'm sure there's other places who are actually denying women, right, education, girls in education based on the clothes that they wear. Isn't that hypocrisy?
100%. And I think that's what they're most frightened of. And this is what the clash that's happening in a lot of places, but India in this particular example, because what it does is it undermines their way of life. It undermines their ideology. And as we know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that, when the false and the truth, or the truth and falsehood clash, then falsehood is destroyed. And the key word for me when I, read that translation is the word clash. Because often you don't see clash until two ideas come face to face. And the hijab is a good example here because they try to promote the idea of freedom. Yeah, you can wear whatever you want. Then they try to promote the idea of, like you said, women in education. But all of a sudden, if women, especially because society is becoming more secular, becoming more like, even if you are religious, and religiosity is, people who are religious are going in the downwards direction. But even if you are religious, then keep it out of societal life. Yeah. So I think that causes a clash immediately because it's like, okay, we've got to be careful here because if we don't give them their religious freedoms, we're kind of undermining our ideology. If we do give them their religious freedoms, they have an opportunity to show their Islam to the rest of the world, especially because it's at a time when women, even with the Me Too movement and these kind of things, they recognize that the woman's body is still very much objectified in the Western world. All of a sudden, when a sister comes to work fully covered, it's like, wait there a minute, rather than that sister going to work and saying, I've got other, I'll use my body as a means of, or my attractiveness as a means of getting somewhere in work. Instead, only my mind matters or only what my capability matters. Whereas in their society, even if they don't want to, they've created an environment that, your body and how you look and how much you show has a bearing on how you do in a work environment, which is still a male-dominated work environment. So all of that causes this massive clash and they don't like it. They don't like this idea of a sister choosing to cover up more than to show off more because she doesn't fear the fact that she, if she can't get further because she doesn't show her body, she's fine about that because she knows that's covered, that's for her family, that's for her husband, that's not for the general public. And I think that gripes them so much. And this is why constantly different countries, Ofsted, remember, was it a few years ago? Ofsted were asking children, why are you wearing the hijab? Has your parents forced you to wear it? There was Ofsted first. Then there was the European Court of Justice. They said private companies can, if they choose to, tell their staff that they're not allowed to wear hijab if they want that to be part of their dress code. And then you gave the example of France, in public institutions, not allowed to wear the hijab. So I think they all see it that, wait there a minute, we recognize Muslims are there, but this is an outward portrayal of Islam that we don't want in our establishments. And it undermines and shows the hypocrisy of secularism, basically.
Yeah, no, exactly, bro, exactly. And like you said, the situation is for them it is a difficult situation. I like the way you said that if they allow Muslims to behave in the way that Islam dictates, then this is, sometimes when you say that some dawah is from words and other dawah is from behavior and appearance and so on, for them this hurts. And especially if you think about it, maybe in the West at large, but I know in places like UK, when it comes to people converting to Islam, I'm sure
the majority are women.
Yeah, they are. So, it just goes to show that they're finding it extremely difficult. But at the same time, for Muslims, then we should also be aware of our history, the fact that the first university in the world right? It was started by Fatima al-Fikhri, who was a Muslim, right? So in regards to, and also what's important is Islam does not deny education to women, right? However, why I didn't say Muslims? Because some people, right, who are Muslim may have some sort of an opinion that they do that. But here we're talking about Islam here. So, but when they accuse Islam of being something which is backwards and stops women from educating and so on, they don't say Muslims, they say Islam. So it's important to point out, no, this is not the case. From the very first day, there's been scholars that are women, and this isn't the issue. And to point out the hypocrisy that, okay, these Muslim girls who have exams coming up, who are having to sit on the staircase outside the classroom and listen to the lecture, right? Where are you calling for their freedoms or whatever? You're not. Why?
Because where are the women's rights activists now?
Where are the women's? Because now you're, like Rash said, you're in a catch-22 situation. What do we do? Shall we say it's okay for them to wear this then? But then doesn't that go against our narrative that women wear it because they are being forced to wear it? Do you know what I mean? When your basis is hypocrisy and contradiction, right, you'll always find yourself in a pickle.
That's why you're seeing some Hindu people protesting in favor of the hijabi sister. So in retaliation, there's another movement. You know, they were wearing saffron. Then there's people protesting wearing blue. I don't know if you've seen those protests. Yeah, and that was in support of the hijab. Or the sisters being able to wear hijab. And again, there were Muslims in that protest and non-Muslims in that protest, because again, the people themselves realize, you know what, this is hypocritical. If I stand on the side of those people chanting this out, they're stuck. You know, they're even thinking, wait there, do I support my Hindu brethren or do I support what clearly is right? Because, you know, even if they support it from a constitutional right point of view, they're like, wait there, why are we going against our own constitutional right just because it's Muslims here? Maybe there is a Islamophobic undertone and narrative. So, yeah, it's just, it does expose them completely.
When it comes to India, one thing you have to mention is the fact that a lot of people see it that the politics is extremely dirty there. And like Karnataka, for example, is majority, it's a BJP led state. And, there's elections coming up soon. So these guys, they will, let's look closer to home, just over the channel. You know, we see that elections coming up and you see people like Macron trying to push this hard stance on Islam and immigration and so on. So these guys use these games as political tools and maneuvers.
Yeah, when there's that clash, because, you know, when there's an anti-Islamic narrative going on, that means the BJP will get more votes. So you're right, it could have just been a way to instigate that clash. Therefore, the BJP voters will go, you know, we need to vote for them again. Otherwise, the Muslims will have more rights.
Yeah, and also as well, which is concerning, is that, you know, there has to be, you know, somewhat a general public opinion of the masses, which has become anti-Islamic and anti-Muslim. There has to be, because if these guys are having to push this hardcore anti-Islamic stance to come into power, what does that tell you?
As you're Mr. Bollywood as well sometime, there's a Bollywood movie that is the most popular Bollywood movie in the last recent weeks or something, Suryavanshi or something. It's a new one, okay. And it has this. So I read it in an article, and it has a lot of Islamic, anti-Islamic, not even undertones. It's blatant, apparently.
Yeah.
So, and there's some prominent actors in there.
Bro, you've watched it. Why are you saying that you read about it?
Trust me, I haven't. But yeah, seriously.
No, but the thing is, though, in all honesty, is, as you know, there's a bit of Bollywood going on, right? This is nothing new. There's been a constant attack on Pakistan, for example, in their movies. But one thing you've seen in the last couple of years, and it's very interesting, and it actually links the dots, joins the dots to what's happening today, is that there's been movies that are being released which have become blockbusters that are being to do with, for example, the Muslim conquest of India, right? Yeah. And people like, I think it was Mahmud Ghaznavi, Muhammad Ghori, right? And the way these pictures are, the way it's shown is that the Muslims today are the sons of the foreigners who came then. And what it does then in the normal person's mind, it shows that they don't belong here. They're not part of this place, right? However, this is entirely incorrect, but that's the narrative. So I definitely not going to watch that movie anyway, especially now since you said that, because you know, when you watch these movies, it makes your blood boil, bro. You know,
I give both sides. There are movies that are trying to promote like unity between the faiths, no doubt. Yeah, trying to put them on a similar level.
No, but even on a secular liberal level.
Yeah, definitely. And I know it was interesting in this article, mainly on the basis that it was popular, because people can make all sorts of movies and you expect it, especially when the government tried to push a certain narrative. We remember the Rocky movies and stuff like that against the Soviets and things. So you always expect that from the media. That shouldn't be a surprise. But what I found interesting was when, I think, was it JK mentioned public opinion, is that if that movie is popular, that means the public opinion is moving towards, obviously, anti-Islam and anti-Muslim. So that's what part of the signs of genocide is going in that direction.
No, bro, there's maybe many films, and like you said, what's important is these movies have been headlined with like the top stars at the moment.
Yeah,
it's not like a B movie. No. You know, you got the main stars, and in fact, there's a lot of pressure now. There's a lot of pressure on people to, you know, from the stars' point of view, they know it's one, like, you know, it's scary because from the stars, for the actors' point of view, they know if they can land these roles, it actually increases their popularity. Right? It makes them more popular amongst the people, which obviously turns out more stardom, more money. So it is a scary prospect, and you know, we just need to think about how it must be for the Muslims living there, and we just pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, you know, the situation changes. But as we know, the situation can only really change for the betterment with Islam, and anything else will not really change the situation. It may make it less blatant, even though the public opinion is at a level now where that's difficult to do. However, nevertheless, whether it's another 50 years or 100 years, as long as there is, you know, kufr being implemented in India, Muslims will not receive any justice, and they will not receive their rights, and that's unfortunately, that's just the way it is, man. You know, and but I think the one thing that I want to end on this section really is the point that JK emphasized is, you know, when we see the video of Muskan Khan, this should really motivate us that, you know, here you have a sister who is amongst a mob who instinctively just start shouting Allahu Akbar defiantly. And we see people now, Muslims now, you know, who are in, you know, not as much risk as she was in at that particular moment, right? But we don't respond in this way, very passive. And I think that's something which, you know, Muskan Khan really has set an example. And if that's for the sisters, then certainly for the brothers, you know, something to take away, that, you know, we need to be defiant and not sheepish, you know, against this onslaught that we see against Islam and Muslims today.
And to make like a comparison, you know, they tried to prop up Malala Yousafzai as being this model Muslim who defied the Taliban for education, right? This was their story about this woman who, you know, Taliban are this oppressive, and it's all for their political agenda, obviously. And they propped her up, and you know, she's actually fallen off her pedestal a bit, even amongst Muslims that did look up to her. But you know,
not a bit, bro.
Compare her. I don't want to speak too much about it, but compare her to Muskan Khan, who was, like you said, defiantly standing out against this mob. You know, ahead of anyone else, ahead of the brothers, ahead of, you know, she showed the example that we should follow. But at the same time, she herself, as well as other sisters, really need to make sure that we control the narrative, know that we're doing this for the sake of Allah, not for anyone else, not for constitutional right, not for liberalism or freedom, none of that. We're doing it for the fact that we want to serve Allah, want to please Allah, and we will continue doing whatever is required to please Allah.
I think that's the important point. One thing I do want to sort of finish this this main section on is that I don't know too much about Sister Muskan Khan. So what I would say is that, we champion her actions. However, Allah forbid, if there's a full U-turn or something, and we find out Muskan Khan probably, has views and promotes them which are not sort of in line with Islam, then it's not like we're endorsing completely. What we're saying is that the action she took, the way she arrived on a motorbike, she looked like she was there for business. You understand? And we champion that, right? But just be wary of the fact that if something is said afterwards, people may accuse, well, you're promoting this person, now she's saying this. We like the action, which was for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward her and make her steadfast, and hopefully she will remain steadfast against this aggression. So yeah, guys, listen, that was the main section, but I didn't want to end without getting your views on a topic which has kind of exploded, right? The issue of Kurt Zouma. So we've all heard, we've probably seen the video about, with Kurt Zouma, where he's seen dropping his cat and kicking her and slapping his cat. And as you know, the fallout's been massive, right? Now, some of the things I'm going to read out is the fallout of what's happened. Okay, so West Ham have fined Zouma 2 weeks' wages, right? Understood to be about £250,000. Okay, Adidas have dropped him as a client. Okay, in France, animal rights group the 30 Million Friends Foundation condemned the heinous act and called for Zouma to be suspended from the national team. More than 225,000 people have signed an online petition on change.org, started by anti-animal abuse, calling for Zouma to be prosecuted amid a growing public backlash. National pet charity Blue Cross described the incident as truly horrific, or truly horrifying, and called for Zouma to face prosecution. West Ham's wellness partner, Vitality, has suspended its sponsorship with the club with immediate effect. Experience Kissimmee, one of the club sponsors, has also ended its sponsorship. Parliament have actually discussed the Zouma incident during the Parliament sessions, right? And even Kurt Zouma's brother, Johan, he was suspended by his team, Dagenham and Redbridge. And we have seen people like Michael Antonio coming out and, saying that, well, what he did, was it worse than racism? So we have seen people coming out and trying to say that, look, we see people who are accused and found guilty for racism, yet they don't get a fine as close to this. They're suspended for a little bit. Whilst here, you want this guy to lose his job, basically, right? And actually, there's a lot of people coming out mainly from Black people who are saying that, is the value of a cat more than a black man, right? What I want to ask you guys, okay, is that the fallout to this seems quite big. I'm not going to say exaggerated, right? Because it depends which way you're coming from, okay? However, if you think about what we just discussed before, we discussed children being taken away from their parents. We discussed Muslim women who are being denied education. We see lynchings in places like India. We see places like concentration camps in places like Assam. We see stuff happening in Kashmir. We see all these things that are happening to humans around the world, right? Now, the fallout on this and how heavy people are coming down on Kurt Zouma. The question I'm asking you guys is, how has the Western way of life conditioned, programmed, or I'd even say sedated people to the extent that all of these other issues that we see that are affecting human beings, right? We don't get that same response. However, here we see a situation with a cat being, you want to call it abuse, let's call it abuse, being abused, right? And there's such an uproar from places like France, where we know what they're doing to Algerians, what they did to Algerians. We know what they're doing to Muslims, closing down mosques and all this, there's no uproar, right? So what my question is, and whether you actually agree with me is the first point, how have they managed to sedate people so much that they can react on this story, but not react on that story?
The first thing I'd say, obviously, mistreating animals is against Islam. We know this, right? I mean, we know Muhammad Sallallahu encouraged us to treat animals with respect, have love towards them, don't harm them. We also know, the famous companion Abu Huraira, literally his name means the father of kittens. So that's straight, obviously, in Islam. Treating animals, we have to treat them well, and there's sin treating. But what Zouma did was obviously wrong. No one's advocating, no one's supporting him what he did. But as you said, there is, when you compare, I mean, I don't understand it, but when you compare this action to all these other actions, even if you just take football, like Antonio, what's his name? Michael Antonio.
Michael Antonio
said, Suarez, for example, he his abuse towards Evra, the fact that John Terry, he said something to, I'm not going to repeat what they said, but...
Bro, with the Suarez issue, the Liverpool team came out in support, but they even made T-shirts for it.
Exactly. And this is out and out racism, right? There's no, you can't deny it. It's caught on camera, basically. And they got I think Suarez got like £40,000 fine, and he got banned for 8 matches, but he's still playing. I think he's still playing, right? Does he still play for Atletico?
But my point is, no one called for him to lose his job.
Exactly. That's my point. No one called for it, right? But when it comes to this, I mean, is there an undertone of racism here as well? Because he's black. That's one angle to take. That there's a harsher reaction. And then the second point is, why is it that when a cat is harmed, there's this reaction, and I would call it an overreaction, but when others do stuff like this racism, as well as misogynistic behavior from the likes of like Ryan Giggs and stuff, there's not the same call, right? So I like I said, I don't understand this, but it's what you said. I think what's happened is, firstly, we live in an individualistic society, so people only care about their problems here and now. And the other thing is, when it comes to like cats, there's a strange obsession with animals in the West. I'm calling it obsession. I'm not saying we don't want to harm animals, but there's this obsession, right? Like, you can't, even like I have conversations with colleagues where, the dog might have died or something. Like, it's sad, yeah? But they act like their child has died. Literally, the days off.
I have a cut. I have a cut.
No, you've got a cut, yeah.
And he's a G, you know what I mean? But the point is there's a limit, isn't it?
That's my point. And I don't want to sound like, I'm not knocking it. Obviously, you have love for animals, but it goes to the next level. And just making it serious, their governments themselves have blood on their hands when it comes to Iraq, Afghanistan, like you said, France with Algeria, where they've actually killed people, innocent people.
Bro, killing people, killing people.
They continue to kill people, exactly. And there isn't this reaction from people, from the population. I don't really have an answer for you. I don't understand it, but it is quite astonishing, to be fair.
But that's the thing. Before I come to you, Rash, is that here I'm not even talking about from a governmental level.
No.
Right? If you want to talk about governmental level, right, there's a quote by Nadine Dorries. She's a culture secretary, right? And the issue to do with the Partygate about Boris and who's going to support him. What she said was, and I'm sure she said this with the backdrop of this Kurt Zouma thing, she said that she would probably withdraw her support for Boris Johnson if he went out and kicked a dog. Now, here you're talking about a guy who has made racist remarks, anti-Islamic remarks, foreign intervention in Muslim lands, selling weapons to regimes who are bombing people like in Yemen and stuff, right? Partying whilst people are dying, people can't meet their loved ones. Blatant liar. But this person said, all of this stuff, I'm behind him. Probably if he kicked a dog, I would change my view on it. So if the government, forget these people have lost the plot. But for me, it's more like from the people, because but honestly, you don't see it. I mean, and the stuff that we're talking about, whether it's Sweden, whether it's Afghanistan, all of these things, not even just that, the fact that in UK, you can go down the street and there's what do you call them places, Rash, where they just give free food out? They give food to people who don't have food.
Like homeless shelter.
Homeless shelters and all these. There is, people begging. There's problems here, right? There's not an issue. There's not an issue that people are dying. When it comes to this, something like this, the reaction is just disproportionate, man. Rash, what are you saying, bro?
I think there's two sides to this. I think there's an element of social engineering. We see it in the media in general, which I'll come on to. But I think generally in the Western world, they do have like especially cats and dogs. Can't just say any animal here because, like people find out about the meat industry, how they treat cows and chickens and stuff before they're slaughtered and brought to be eaten and stuff like that. And yeah, I know some people see that and stop eating meat, but a lot of people don't really care. Yeah, but I think in this society, certainly Western society, there is a link to cats and dogs that they actually treat them better than human beings sometimes. And I know some people will say, look, I love my dog more than anybody else because it's loyal to me. I get more loyalty from my dog than I get from human beings. So I think there's that element of it. And I haven't got an issue with that generally. People saw that person doing that, probably linked that to their own cat or dog and thought, how dare he? But I just find it a bit hypocritical because there's probably lots of people doing stuff like that. I've seen people in the street, the way they treat their animals sometimes is not particularly nice. And just so it just happens to be a footballer, someone earning millions, it's easy to point fingers, it's easy to throw a stone, isn't it? So I think there's that element of it. But the reason I think people are more concerned by this than actual human beings dying in places, that comes from an element of social engineering. Yeah. That comes from the fact that all of the time when we're constantly shown war and problems in the world and poverty, and there's all these charities which constantly bombard you with little kids dying and starving, crying. You see all the imagery all the charity organizations use. Yeah, it has a desensitizing effect. And yes, it upsets us, but because we're bombarded with it in this society so much, poverty doesn't get solved by states. Poverty and war is actually instigated by states, never being prevented, or states aren't doing enough to prevent war. Yeah. So because of that, there's that element of social engineering. So we've become numb to it, and the Western world. And therefore things like, now and again, you'll get these sudden stories of, a certain elephant somewhere is stuck and it becomes world news. Or there was a lion a few years ago, someone killed a lion using a gun and then posted pictures holding the lion up, this woman or something and stuff. And it made international news. I think those stories are somewhat unique and they hit a nerve for people and suddenly it goes big. But I think that's where the social engineering has come, and people have been, they've been completely desensitized to the major problems of the world, and these other things are just ways of distracting them, in my opinion.
Is it also, I agree with all that you've said, is it also, if you compare like when a terrorist attack happens here in the UK, in Western lands, not just the UK, Western lands, Australia, whatever, New Zealand, the reaction to that is overwhelmingly outrage at what's happened here. Westerners have died, right?
Wall-to-wall news. You get those, with those websites where the messages kind of keep updating live
updates. But when it happens in the Muslim world, I mean, there's hardly any, they will make the news, but no one really cares about it, no one really talks about it. No workplaces having minute silence for it. That's what usually angers me, that having a minute silence for New Zealand. Okay, I'm not condoning it, obviously, innocent people have died, but the selective outrage, we've spoken about it before, the selective outrage. And it comes back to this point you made about desensitizing. What they've actually done is they've dehumanized Muslims or the non-West. So if it happens in Africa or Asia, they've dehumanized us as though, in a way, they either deserve it or
worse than animals.
Yeah, worse than animals, or literally worse than animals, actually, in how in the topic we're discussing. But also as though it's kind of, but that's just that happens there. that's like collateral or whatever you want to call it. And in fact, they've humanized animals here, cats and dogs. So they've dehumanized Muslims, but they've humanized so that the reaction to it, I'm not saying it's right, obviously it's wrong, but they made it such a big thing that, oh, how dare he kick a cat because, he needs to be banned for life.
The thing is, Jackie, just quickly add to that is that there was a lot of talk about the cat was defenseless, okay? You're talking about stuff happening there, and I think Rash made a fantastic point about the desensitizing, but I would say also dehumanizing.
Yeah.
And I would say Muslims in particular, because you may be talking about it may not concern people, what's happening in Syria, these places. However, you hear stories where people are trying to cross the channel, right? And the way those people are viewed upon, they're not even viewed as human beings. Right? Remember the papers years ago? They were called cockroaches. Yeah. These people that have ran away from war, right? Flee from those lands, who are now trying to cross this dangerous journey over the seas and so on, but they're seen as being rodents. Yeah. But the one I'm talking about is the perception about it is seen as negative, right? Even when you've had situations where the coast guards have gone out and they're even trying to blow up and puncture the sort of boats. Yeah. But the thing is that the perception is that they have become like they're like coming over to take our resources, or they're coming over to take our tax money and whatever. But that is a thing about it now, where people have become like this because of what Rash said, social engineering, where you've taken this human element out, that these are children, young children, mothers, fathers that are risking their lives to flee from horrific life, right? But that's not hitting you as much as a cat being kicked. I think there's a big problem there, bro.
Definitely. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's the thing. And I'm not blaming people. It's social engineering. I think what Rash said is perfect. And that's why, again, it's a scary notion. But going back to, I think JK mentioned about the 10 signs of genocide, right? We see a worldwide campaign where one of those points is making that people that are, that you're against, right, subhuman, right? Dehumanizing them, okay? So that when this happens, it's like, okay, it's happened, right? Yeah. And I think that's something important.
So, yeah. Do you know how it's quite conveniently linked even to the Sweden topic? So in Sweden, the Swedish, back before, like, say 20 years ago, maybe a bit longer, because Sweden was known as somewhere where whenever there was conflict in the world, they would be one of the first. I think they're Canada, Sweden, and some other country. They're in the top 3 countries that take on immigrants. Yeah, when there's war somewhere, problem somewhere, they prided themselves in bringing people over and helping them after they've had to suffer conflict. And previously, the political establishment was very much more center-leaning, or more centrist, and it was very much about we can help people. We want to be known as a nation that helps other countries, blah blah blah. But one of the reasons it's going more kind of like more radical and more right-wing and more populism based is on the basis that as more and more Muslims have come into the country, and as they see that, oh, okay, look, now we're having to look after more Muslims, and now even the politicians start speaking about, oh, these Muslims, they have their own laws, they have the Sharia law that they want, they don't want to come here and live by our laws. Those Swedish people are now starting to go, even if I wanted to help people, I don't want to help Muslims anymore. And the reason why I don't want to help Muslims anymore, not because they're not human, but because they want a way of life that conflicts with our way of life. And that in itself is a way of dehumanizing, because all of a sudden they're placing the value of a Western person or a Swedish person higher than a Muslim person.
Bro, I would say a non-Muslim person, because I can't remember whether it was Slovenia or Hungary. When they were told that they have to take in some Syrian refugees, they said, we'll take some, but only if they're non-Muslim.
Yeah, exactly.
Hungary, I think.
Exactly. And again, to be fair, that just exposes their hypocrisy. But from my point of view, I'll be like, fine, okay, you don't want to take us in. Stop bombing our lands. Let us live the way we want to live and let us live by our way of life. And that way you don't have to deal with us. But no, you're the ones that are destroying our lands, usurping our wealth, and then complaining when we come over to your lands.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing in it, bro. I was chatting to this guy. Well, we have a bit of a dialogue on one of these online platforms because he was like, "Well, if you don't kind of like it, then just go
Leave.
back type of thing in it." I said, I go, that's cool. I said to him, all right, so you stop interfering in our lands, you stop sending warplanes, you stop bloodshed, you take, and when you leave. You take back the puppets that you put there, right? You stop support for the Zionist entity, right? You do all these things and more, we'll gladly leave, right? We'll gladly leave, right?
He probably regretted asking you then.
No, but the thing is he just went off on another thing. But the reality is what you have to, even forget these other wars, bro, even if you look at it from the point of view, I think that comedian, a South African comedian,
Trevor
Noah, he was doing a sketch where this British, they go to India, right? And he's like, oh, you were taking you over. And basically what his point was that to British people is, look, had you not gone there, they would not have known you exist, right? So no one would be here because they didn't know you. They would not have known that you exist. So we shouldn't fall for this. Well, if you don't like it, leave. The reality is that, yeah, when you leave our lands completely, right, we will leave, right? But also it's a very weak argument because you have people who are from these countries, born and bred here, who have different views, right? Where are you going to send them to? Guantanamo Bay or something, right? So it's just bogus, isn't it? The argument doesn't stand any ground. But it's a good thing that you said that. It's reminding me that, look, stop interfering, stop bombing, leave our lands, and maybe we can go back to go back and rebuild our lands in the way we wanted to. I also said, actually, once you pay reparations, right?
Yeah. Don't let them off that easily.
Don't let them off that easy. Pay reparations as well, because we need that to rebuild our places, right?
I was going to just say, linked to you, the recent story about Afghanistan, where the US are basically using Afghanistan's money that they froze,
bastards,
to pay for the aid, as well as fund the 9/11 families for which they caused.
That's mad, innit, bro? That's mad, man. But guys, listen, inshallah, it's been a eventful podcast, some really good thoughts. Just get your final thoughts, really, on whether you have any on what we've discussed so far. Rash, I'll start with you, bro.
Not many, just one really. It's just I think Muslims, like the sister, just need to be on the front foot and just notice how as soon as we present the correct Islamic view, as soon as we present that, look, this is a ruling from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as soon as we present that, look, why should we have to live by these constitutional rights and things, then their way of life collapses. The hypocrisy is immediately evident in what they promote. The hypocrisy, there is no hypocrisy on what we promote. We want to live by the Quran and the Sunnah. We say that openly and outwardly. That's what we live by. If you want us to live by, like you said, in our lands, we'll go and live like that in our lands. Let us live like that. So stay on the front foot. Always present Islam, and you will notice how the falsehood crumbles. So that would be my main message.
No, spot on, bro. Spot on. JK?
Similar, really. Again, I think we've said a lot, but very similar that, linking the two stories of India as well as the initial story, the second story on Zouma. That when it comes to Islam, they want us to leave Islam. So we need to, like Rasha said, stay strong on our deen, but recognize it is an actual campaign for us to integrate, for us to accept their values, for us to view as though British life or Western life is worth more than our own Muslim life. Look, any innocent life being killed, we're against. But we belong to one ummah, one global ummah, and we need to recognize that is where our loyalty lies. And we need to be strong on our deen, because there is a campaign, whether it be to women, to Muslims in general, they want us to leave our deen. They might say you've got your Islam in terms of your salah and your mosques and all of that, but they want us to essentially apostatize from our deen. So we need to really recognize that threat, and for ourselves and our future generations, try to protect ourselves from this threat.
Yeah. Subhanallah, bro. Just from what you said and what Ras said, looking at all the stories, whether it's Sweden, whether it's what we covered in India, Kurt Zouma, Kurt Zouma to a lesser extent, but it reminds me of the hadith of the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam when he talked about that the enemies will come to you as if they come into a banquet, and they will take what they want. They will take what they want. And when we look at the situation now, whether it's in India, whether it's in places like Canada, wherever it is, when we talked about before, where this dehumanizing Muslims, this is a global campaign. It's happening everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And you can see how this is one campaign, and it really kind of perfectly describes the hadith. But what's important for us Muslims to take away then is that, when the Muslims asked, why was this the case? Why, how is this, how did the Muslims allow this? And the Prophet ﷺ said that because they had wahn in their heart, that the love for this life and the hatred for death and the hereafter and so on, right? So I think that's something that's really important, building on what both of you guys have said, that right now is a time where we need to hold on to our deen, we need to be steadfast. There's so many campaigns which are designed to actually undo exactly that, is to take us away from our deen, right? Now's the time to make a stand. And when we do, that's when we can change our situation. Because as Imam Anwar Ulaki, rahimahullah, once said that when the example of this hadith, his own commentary said, look at the example it gives of food. Food is defenseless. Food can't fight back, right? So we need to stop being just food for people to have a buffet on, right? And we need to be able to defend. And this isn't just from a physical way. Before that comes defending our ideas, defending Islam, and this comes through effort, comes through learning the deen, education, and so on. So guys, some really fantastic points on this podcast. Inshallah ta'ala, Jazakallah khair for joining me once again on the Islamic Vibes podcast. It can't happen without you guys. And for the listeners, obviously you guys are target for those watching and listening. Please share this with your family and friends. And as you know, you can access the YouTube channel, my YouTube channel, Path to Revival, and you can also access the podcast on all popular podcast platforms. On that note, brothers, Jazakallah khair, and inshallah ta'ala, I will see you guys on the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.